Stand on the Galata Bridge today, and you can watch ferries slice through the Bosphorus while the call to prayer echoes from 1,000 minarets across both continents. Every year, 15 million people walk beneath the same sky where Roman emperors once plotted the fate of Christianity, where Ottoman sultans commanded armies that reached the gates of Vienna, where a city survived more sieges than any other capital in history. But rewind 2,700 years, and you would have found Greek sailors hauling their boats onto a rocky peninsula, staring across the strait at shepherds tending flocks on the Asian shore, utterly unaware they were founding what would become the most fought-over piece of land on earth. Conquest. Conversion. Siege. Rebirth. Using cutting-edge AI reconstruction, we are about to walk you through every century of Istanbul's story, from the first stone walls raised by Greek colonists to the sprawling metropolis of 16 million that straddles 2 continents today. 3 empires rose and fell on this peninsula. 2 of them believed they ruled the world. One of them was right for 1,000 years. This is the city that refused to choose between Europe and Asia, Christianity and Islam, past and future. This is Istanbul. In 657 BC, a Greek navigator named Byzas stood at the tip of a triangular peninsula and made a decision that would echo through 3 millennia. He had sailed from the city of Megara with a charter from the oracle at Delphi, instructions cryptic even by ancient standards, settle opposite the land of the blind. When Byzas saw the Asian shore across the strait, he understood. Any colonist who had passed this peninsula without settling it must have been blind to its strategic perfection. The site controlled the only sea route between the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. The Golden Horn, a deep natural harbor, offered protection from storms and enemies alike. Hills rose steeply enough to defend, gently enough to build upon. Freshwater springs bubbled from the slopes. The climate was mild. The soil, fertile. Byzas named his new city Byzantion, after himself, and within a generation it was charging tolls to every merchant vessel passing through the Bosphorus. For 6 centuries, Byzantion grew rich on transit taxes and fish. The city minted its own coins. It survived Persian sieges, Spartan blockades, and Macedonian conquest. When Alexander the Great swept through Asia Minor in 334 BC, Byzantion bent the knee and kept its walls. When Rome began devouring the Mediterranean world, Byzantion chose alliance over resistance. The Romans granted it autonomy, protection, and the right to keep taxing ships. It was a comfortable existence for a city that had learned to bow to distant emperors while keeping its coffers full. But in 193 AD, Byzantion made a catastrophic miscalculation. When the Roman Empire fractured into civil war, the city backed Pescennius Niger against the eventual victor, Septimius Severus. Severus did not forgive easily. His legions besieged Byzantion for 3 years, starving the population until they surrendered in 196 AD. Severus ordered the walls demolished, the city's rights stripped, its autonomy crushed. For a generation, Byzantion was reduced to a provincial village, its golden age seemingly over. Then Severus had a change of heart. His son Caracalla convinced him that a ruined Byzantion served no one. The emperor ordered the walls rebuilt, higher and thicker than before. He constructed a hippodrome for chariot races, baths in the Roman style, colonnaded streets. By the time Severus died in 211 AD, Byzantion had been resurrected, stronger than ever. The city had learned a lesson it would never forget: survival meant adaptability, and adaptability meant knowing when to rebuild from ash. On the morning of November 8, 324 AD, the Roman Emperor Constantine stood on the Acropolis of Byzantion and began pacing out the boundaries of a new capital. His engineers thought he had lost his mind. He walked miles beyond the old walls, marking a perimeter 6 times larger than the existing city, stretching across hills and valleys that were still farmland. When one advisor asked where he intended to stop, Constantine replied that he would walk until the invisible guide leading him commanded him to halt. Constantine had just defeated his last rival, Licinius, in a battle fought within sight of the city. He now ruled an empire that stretched from Britain to Mesopotamia, but Rome itself was a problem. The old capital was dominated by a pagan senate, weighted down by centuries of tradition, too far west to respond to threats on the Danube and the Euphrates. Constantine needed a new center of gravity, a Christian capital, a city he could shape from marble and ambition. Byzantion offered everything. It sat at the crossroads of Europe and Asia. It commanded the grain route from Egypt and the Black Sea. It could be defended by sea on 3 sides. Constantine renamed it Nova Roma, New Rome, but the world called it Constantinople, the city of Constantine, and the name stuck. For 6 years, 40,000 workers transformed the peninsula. They doubled the length of the city walls, enclosing an area larger than Rome itself. They built a new hippodrome that could seat 100,000 spectators. They raised an imperial palace complex on the eastern tip of the peninsula, with audience halls clad in marble and mosaics. They constructed aqueducts to carry water from forests 20 miles away. Constantine scoured the empire for statues and relics, stripping pagan temples across Greece and Asia Minor to adorn his Christian capital. The serpent column from Delphi, cast in bronze to commemorate a Greek victory over Persia 8 centuries earlier, was hauled to Constantinople and installed in the hippodrome. Porphyry columns from Egypt, obelisks from Karnak, statues of Apollo and Zeus, all were repurposed as monuments to Rome's endurance. On May 11, 330 AD, Constantine dedicated his new capital with ceremonies that blended Christian liturgy and Roman pageantry. Priests blessed the walls. Chariots raced in the hippodrome. The emperor processed through streets lined with cheering crowds, past forums where construction scaffolding still stood. Constantinople was declared the equal of Rome in every legal sense, entitled to its own senate, its own grain dole, its own prefect. Within a generation, it had eclipsed the old capital in population and wealth. Constantine died in 337 AD, but his city lived. When the Western Roman Empire crumbled under barbarian invasions in the 5th century, Constantinople endured. While Rome was sacked by Visigoths in 410 and Vandals in 455, Constantinople's walls held. The Eastern Empire, which historians would later call Byzantium, became the Roman Empire, the only Roman Empire that mattered. Greek replaced Latin as the language of government. Christianity became the defining force of imperial identity. And Constantinople, the city Constantine had walked into existence, became the richest, most populous, most cultured capital in the Christian world. By 500 AD, the city held perhaps 500,000 people. Its market sold silk from China, spices from India, furs from Russia, ivory from Africa. Its churches gleamed with gold mosaics. Its university taught rhetoric, philosophy, law, and medicine. Its emperors styled themselves as the 13th apostle, God's chosen ruler on earth, and Constantinople was the new Jerusalem, the city where heaven and earth met. In January 532 AD, Constantinople erupted into the deadliest urban riot in Roman history. It began at the Hippodrome, where rival chariot racing factions, the Blues and the Greens, united against the Emperor Justinian's tax policies. The chant started as a demand for lower taxes. Within hours, it became a call for revolution. Rioters stormed the prisons, freed convicted murderers, and set fire to the Senate House. Flames consumed the Basilica of Hagia Sophia, the church of holy wisdom that had stood since Constantine's day. The mob proclaimed a new emperor and marched on the palace. Justinian prepared to flee by ship. His general, Belisarius, urged evacuation. The palace guard was assembling boats. Then the Empress Theodora, a former actress who had clawed her way from the theater to the throne, stood and delivered a speech that changed history. She told Justinian that purple made a fine burial shroud, that she would rather die an empress than live a fugitive. Justinian stayed. Belisarius led 3,000 soldiers into the Hippodrome, where 30,000 rioters had gathered to celebrate their victory, and methodically slaughtered them. By nightfall, the Nika riots were over. Historians estimate the death toll at 30,000. Justinian emerged from the bloodbath more powerful than ever, and he rebuilt Constantinople as a statement of divine mandate. The burned church of Hagia Sophia would be replaced by the greatest building in Christendom. Justinian summoned two mathematicians, Anthemius of Tralles and Isidore of Miletus, and commanded them to design a dome that would surpass the Pantheon in Rome. They created a structure that seemed to defy physics, a dome 100 feet in diameter, floating on 4 arches, rising 15 stories above the floor, pierced by 40 windows so that light poured down as if from heaven itself. 10,000 workers labored for 5 years. The emperor imported marble from quarries across the empire, green from Thessaly, yellow from North Africa, purple porphyry from Egypt. When Hagia Sophia was dedicated in December 537 AD, Justinian reportedly walked to the center of the nave, looked up at the dome, and whispered, "Solomon, I have surpassed you." But Justinian's ambition stretched far beyond one church. He intended to reconquer the Western Roman Empire, to restore Rome's glory from Britain to the Euphrates. His general Belisarius invaded North Africa in 533 AD and destroyed the Vandal kingdom in a single campaign. In 535 AD, Byzantine armies landed in Sicily and began a 20-year war to retake Italy from the Ostrogoths. Byzantine forces seized southern Spain from the Visigoths. At its peak, Justinian's empire controlled the entire Mediterranean coastline, from Gibraltar to Gaza. The cost was staggering. Justinian's wars drained the treasury. His building projects, Hagia Sophia, aqueducts, fortresses, roads, required constant taxation. In 541 AD, a plague arrived from Egypt, the first recorded outbreak of bubonic plague in history. The Plague of Justinian killed perhaps a third of Constantinople's population. Bodies piled in the streets faster than they could be buried. Justinian himself fell ill but survived. The empire's population, estimated at 26 million in 540 AD, dropped to perhaps 16 million by the time Justinian died in 565 AD. Yet Constantinople endured. The walls Justinian strengthened held against Huns, Avars, and Persians. The administrative machinery he reformed, a complex bureaucracy of themes, military districts, tax collectors, and governors, kept the empire functioning through crisis after crisis. The legal code he commissioned, the Corpus Juris Civilis, became the foundation of law across Europe for the next 1,000 years. And Hagia Sophia stood as proof that even in an age of plague and war, human ambition could touch the divine. By 600 AD, Constantinople was the undisputed center of the Christian world. Rome had shrunk to a provincial town. Alexandria, Ansh, and Jerusalem were prosperous but provincial. Constantinople alone held 1 million people, commanded fleets that controlled the Mediterranean, minted gold coins accepted from Ireland to India. Its emperors wore crowns studded with gemstones and ruled from a palace so opulent that foreign ambassadors wept at the sight. Mechanical lions flanked the throne, roaring through hidden bellows. Golden birds perched on a gilded tree, singing through clockwork mechanisms. The emperor himself was raised on a platform mid-audience, lifted by hydraulic machinery so that envoys who approached on their knees found themselves prostrate before a figure who seemed to ascend to heaven. This was the height of Byzantine power, the apex of Roman continuity, the moment when Constantinople truly believed it would last forever. In the summer of 674 AD, an Arab fleet appeared in the Sea of Marmara and began a siege that would last 5 years. The armies of the Rashidun Caliphate had already conquered Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and Persia. Jerusalem had fallen in 637 AD. Alexandria in 641 AD. The Sasanian Empire, Rome's ancient rival, had been obliterated. Now the Caliphate set its sights on Constantinople, the last great prize, the city whose fall would open Europe to Islam. For 5 summers, Arab fleets blockaded the city. For 5 winters, they withdrew to resupply. Byzantine engineers responded with a weapon that would save the empire. Greek fire, a liquid incendiary that burned on water, could not be extinguished, and was sprayed from siphons mounted on the prows of ships. The formula was a state secret, known only to the imperial family and a handful of chemists. Modern scholars believe it was based on petroleum, quicklime, and sulfur. Arab sailors called it Roman fire, and they feared it more than any weapon they had ever faced. In 678 AD, a Byzantine fleet attacked the Arab navy with Greek fire and incinerated it. The siege collapsed. The Caliphate signed a treaty and withdrew. But the Arabs returned. In 717 AD, the Umayyad Caliph Sulayman ibn Abd al-Malik assembled the largest invasion force ever sent against Constantinople, 1,800 ships and 80,000 soldiers. The new Byzantine emperor, Leo III, had just seized power in a coup. He was an outsider, a Syrian-born general, but he understood siege warfare better than any man alive. Leo stockpiled grain for a year. He strengthened the walls. He positioned fire ships at the mouth of the Golden Horn. When the Arab fleet entered the strait, Leo's navy attacked with Greek fire, destroying dozens of ships in the first engagement. The siege lasted 11 months. Arab armies camped outside the walls through the brutal winter of 717 to 718 AD, the coldest in a generation. Soldiers froze to death in their tents. Supplies ran low. The Bulgars, a nomadic people who had recently settled north of Constantinople, attacked the Arab camp and slaughtered thousands. In August 718 AD, the Caliphate ordered a retreat. Of the 1,800 ships that had arrived, fewer than 5 returned. The historian Theophanes estimated Arab losses at more than 150,000 men. Constantinople had broken the Islamic conquests. The tide turned. For the next 4 centuries, the Byzantine Empire and the Caliphates fought to a bloody stalemate across Anatolia and the Levant. Neither side could deliver a knockout blow. Constantinople remained Christian. The frontier stabilized. Europe remained Christian, in part because a Syrian general-turned-emperor had known how to deploy Greek fire. Yet the sieges left scars. Constantinople's population, which had approached 1 million under Justinian, shrank to perhaps 300,000 by 750 AD. Plague, war, and famine had entered entire quarters. The emperors struggled to maintain the aqueducts, the forums, the monuments Constantine had built. The hippodrome still roared with chariot races, but whole sections of seating had collapsed. The great palace still housed the emperor, but entire wings stood abandoned. And within the church, a crisis was brewing. In 726 AD, Emperor Leo III banned religious icons, declaring that images of Christ and the saints violated the commandment against graven images. The iconoclasm controversy split the empire for over a century. Monasteries were shuttered. Mosaics were smashed. Riots erupted between iconoclasts who saw images as idolatry and iconophiles who believed icons were windows to the divine. The papacy in Rome condemned iconoclasm, widening the rift between Greek East and Latin West that would eventually split Christianity into Orthodox and Catholic churches. Through it all, Constantinople endured. The walls held. The bureaucracy functioned. The gold coin, the nomisma, remained the international currency. And the city remained the largest, richest, most learned capital in Christendom, even as its empire slowly contracted, even as its certainties crumbled, even as it learned that survival required compromises that Constantine could never have imagined. On the morning of April 13, 1204, Venetian sailors and French knights smashed through the sea walls of Constantinople and poured into the city that had repelled 20 sieges over 9 centuries. They were crusaders, Christian soldiers who had taken vows to liberate Jerusalem from Muslim rule. Instead, they sacked the greatest Christian city in the world. The Fourth Crusade had been hijacked by Venetian merchants who convinced the Crusaders to attack Constantinople in exchange for transport and supplies. The pretext was a Byzantine succession dispute. The reality was greed. For 3 days, Latin soldiers ransacked palaces, churches, and monasteries. They smashed altars for gold. They melted down ancient relics. They stripped mosaics from walls. The bronze horses of the Hippodrome were shipped to Venice, where they still stand atop St. Mark's Basilica. The crown of thorns, believed to have been worn by Christ during the crucifixion, was sold to pay debts and eventually ended up in Paris. Libraries were burned. Manuscripts that preserved the only copies of ancient Greek texts were destroyed. Nuns were raped. Priests were murdered at their altars. The historian Nicetas Choniates, who witnessed the sack, wrote that even the Saracens are merciful and kind compared to these men who bear the cross of Christ on their shoulders. The Crusaders installed a Latin emperor, Baldwin of Flanders, and carved the Byzantine Empire into feudal fiefdoms ruled by Frankish warlords. Constantinople became the capital of a fragile Latin empire that would last just 57 years. But the Byzantines did not disappear. The imperial family fled to Nicaea, a city in western Anatolia, and established a government in exile. For half a century, three rival Byzantine states, Nicaea, Trebizond, and Epirus, fought to reclaim Constantinople while the Latin occupiers struggled to hold it. The Latins never understood the city. They could not maintain the aqueducts. They could not navigate the bureaucracy. They could not command the loyalty of the Greek population. By 1260, the Latin Empire was bankrupt, its churches stripped of every valuable ornament, its population reduced to perhaps 30,000. In July 1261, a Byzantine general named Alexios Strategopoulos approached Constantinople with a small force and discovered that the Latin garrison had sailed to attack a Byzantine island, leaving the city nearly undefended. Strategopoulos entered through a secret tunnel, opened the gates, and reclaimed Constantinople without a battle. Emperor Michael VIII Palaiologos entered the city in August, processed a Hagia Sophia, and wept at the destruction. The great church's mosaics had been defaced. Its altars, looted. Its marble columns, cracked and stained. Michael spent the rest of his reign trying to restore what the Latins had destroyed, but the empire he ruled was a shadow. The Fourth Crusade had shattered Byzantine power permanently. The empire that had once stretched from Italy to the Euphrates now controlled little more than Constantinople, a few Aegean islands, and a strip of territory in western Anatolia. The population of Constantinople, which had been 400,000 before the Fourth Crusade, never recovered. By 1300, perhaps 50,000 people lived within walls built for 1 million. Worse, the Crusade had empowered a new enemy. While Byzantium bled, Turkish warlords had seized most of Anatolia, the empire's heartland and breadbasket. Among them was a minor chieftain named Osman, who controlled a small territory near Nicaea. His descendants would be called Ottomans. Within a century, they would surround Constantinople on 3 sides. Within 2 centuries, they would conquer it. Yet even in decline, Constantinople remained the heart of Orthodox Christianity, the keeper of Roman law, the repository of Greek learning. Its scholars preserved manuscripts that would ignite the Italian Renaissance. Its theologians debated the nature of the Trinity and the procession of the Holy Spirit. Its churches still gleamed with mosaics, though many now depicted emperors long dead and battles long lost. The city had survived the Persians, the Arabs, the Bulgars, and the Rus. It would survive the Latins. But it would not survive what came next. On the morning of May 29, 1453, the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II entered Constantinople through the broken gate of St. Romanus and rode to Hagia Sophia. He was 21 years old. He had just conquered a city that had resisted invasion for over 1,000 years. Ottoman soldiers were still dragging Byzantine nobles from their hiding places, still looting palaces, still leading columns of captives through streets slick with blood. Mehmed dismounted at the entrance to Hagia Sophia, walked to the center of the nave, and knelt in prayer. The Church of Holy Wisdom, the architectural triumph of Justinian, the spiritual heart of Orthodox Christianity, was now a mosque. The final siege had lasted 53 days. Mehmed commanded 80,000 soldiers and a fleet of over 100 ships. The Byzantines could muster fewer than 7,000 defenders and 26 ships. Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos knew the city was doomed but refused Ottoman offers of safe passage. He fought on the walls with his soldiers, and when the walls were breached, he tore off his imperial regalia and died fighting in the rubble. His body was never conclusively identified. The Ottomans had prepared for this siege for decades. Mehmed's father, Murad II, had built a fortress on the European shore of the Bosphorus in 1452, cutting Constantinople off from Black Sea grain supplies. Mehmed commissioned the largest cannons ever cast, including the basilica, a bronze monster that fired stone balls weighing over half a ton. The cannon could only be fired 7 times a day without overheating, but each shot shook the earth and cracked the Theodosian walls, fortifications that had stood since 413 AD. On April 22, Mehmed achieved the impossible. He transported 70 ships overland, bypassing the chain the Byzantines had stretched across the Golden Horn. Ottoman engineers built a greased wooden track over the hills behind Galata and hauled warships on rollers into the harbor behind the Byzantine defenses. Constantine watched from the walls as Ottoman ships appeared where no ships should be, and knew the end was near. The final assault came before dawn on May 29. Wave after wave of Ottoman soldiers stormed the walls. Greek fire had been exhausted weeks earlier. Arrows ran low. Defenders fought with swords, spears, stones. An Ottoman soldier named Ulubatli Hassan planted the Sultan's banner on a tower and was immediately killed, but the banner stood. Ottoman troops poured through breaches in the walls. By midday, the city had fallen. Mehmed declared Constantinople the new capital of the Ottoman Empire and renamed it Istanbul, though the name would not become official for centuries. He repopulated the city by force, ordering Turkish families from across Anatolia to settle there. He converted churches to mosques but also invited Greek, Armenian, and Jewish communities to return, granting religious minorities autonomy under the millet system. He restored the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate and appointed a new patriarch, ensuring the survival of Orthodox Christianity under Muslim rule. By 1500, Istanbul's population had rebounded to over 200,000. Mehmed built the Topkapi Palace on the site of the old Byzantine Acropolis, a sprawling complex of courtyards, harems, and treasure rooms that would house Ottoman sultans for 4 centuries. His successor, Suleiman the Magnificent, transformed Istanbul into an imperial capital that rivaled any in history. The architect Mimar Sinan filled the skyline with mosques, the Suleimani, the Selimi, the Sultanahmet, each dome a challenge to Hagia Sophia's perfection. The conquest of Constantinople ended the Middle Ages. Byzantine scholars fleeing the Ottomans carried Greek manuscripts to Italy, fueling the Renaissance. The Ottoman Empire controlled the eastern Mediterranean, the Black Sea, and the overland trade routes to Asia, forcing European powers to seek new paths to the Indies, which led to the Age of Exploration. The fall of the last remnant of the Roman Empire shook Christian Europe to its core and sparked calls for new crusades that would never come. Stand on the Galata Bridge today, and you can watch the sun set over minarets and skyscrapers, over a city that has outlasted every empire that claimed it. Istanbul is home to 16 million people, the largest city in Europe, a metropolis that sprawls across 2 continents and 7 hills. The Hagia Sophia still stands, no longer a mosque or a church but a museum, then a mosque again, its identity shifting with the politics of the present. The Theodosian walls, broken by Mehmed's cannons, still trace the western edge of the old city, crumbling in places, restored in others, a scar of stone that marks where Byzantium ended and modernity began. Fishermen still sell their catch along the Golden Horn. Ferries still carry commuters between Europe and Asia in 15-minute crossings that erase the distance empires fought wars to control. Constantine dreamed of a new Rome. Justinian dreamed of a restored empire. Mehmed dreamed of conquest. Each of them built on the ruins of what came before, and each of them left ruins for what came after. But the city itself refused to die. It burned, it was besieged, it was sacked, it was reborn. 3 empires rose and fell on this peninsula, and the city remains, a bridge between continents, between centuries, between the worlds that were and the world that is. Istanbul endures.